Greetings everyone. Welcome to my week 13 video, and this time around I'm going to be talking with you about the Harlem Renaissance. So if you'll follow along with me, go to content up at the top of our course page and then to course documents in the left hand sidebar and look for Introduction to the Harlem Renaissance. So you may sort of be familiar with that word Renaissance, probably from having taken history before. The Harlem Renaissance refers to a blossoming circa 1918 to 1937 of African American culture, particularly in the creative arts, and it is the most influential movement in African American literary history as well. So if I ever ask you on an exam or a quiz about that, to define the Harlem Renaissance and to tell me when it occurred, that's what you would say: 1918, 1937, a blossoming of African American culture, especially of the creative arts, and the most influential movement in African American lit. So it's important, though, to remember that this period, this movement, extended beyond literature. So it embraced literature, it embraced music, theater, visual arts. It was just like this explosion of amazing creativity, and it's really one of my most favorite times in American Lit to think about and to study. So participants sought to reconceptualize the Negro, and this is their words, not mine, apart from the white stereotypes that had influenced Black people's relationship to their heritage and to each other. And so, think about it. W.B. Du Bois often talked about that double consciousness that African Americans often experienced, and we even hear it in the term African Americans, because most of these people have never been to Africa. Certainly they had ancestors maybe who came from Africa, but they don't feel a connection to Africa. That would sort of be the equivalent of always calling me an Irish American or a Scottish American. Because even though, yes, my ancestors came from those places, I don't think of myself as being Irish or Scottish. I just think of myself as being American. And so this movement sought to reconceptualize those kinds of ideas. And they also sought, the participants here, to break free of Victorian moral values and sort of the shame that many of them were forced to feel about aspects of their lives that might, as seen by whites, reinforce these racist beliefs. And so think about, for example, some of the films that were coming out during the 1930s and beyond. I think of Gone with the Wind. I don't know how many of you might have seen Gone with the Wind, but if you have, or if you've read Margaret Mitchell's book of the same title, which inspired the film, then you know that the Black characters, even though some of them were pivotal to the plot, like Mammy, we really don't know very much about them. They're just sort of seen as stereotypical, almost, characters, and everything revolves around the white characters. So if you were an actor in that time period, the variety of roles that you could play was very, very limited. I was actually very blessed to be able to meet Butterfly McQueen and work with her at one point way back in the 1970s, 1980s. And she played Prissy in Gone with the Wind, the little girl. And that little high voice that she had when she played Prissy, she actually, that was her real voice. Even though she was a much older woman at the time that I worked with her, that was how she really sounded. And I asked her, I said, what was it like to be a Black actress in this time and to be part of Gone with the Wind? And she said, well, we were just, all of us, we felt so blessed to even be able to act and to have a platform, where we could act. But she said it is true. Like, for example, you don't know Was Prissy Mammy's granddaughter. You really don't know anything about the relationship of the black characters. They just sort of exist to support the white characters. So the Harlem Renaissance wasn't really dominated by a particular school of thought. Rather, it was characterized by a lot of debate. This movement laid the groundwork for all later African American literature, and it has had a huge impact on the subsequent literature written by black authors after it, and on consciousness worldwide. So the Renaissance wasn't just confined to the Harlem district of New York City, but it kind of began there, and it grew there. Harlem attracted this huge concentration of intellect and talent among black Americans. It served as the symbolic capital of this cultural awakening. And here's what's really cool. So in Harlem in the 1930s, imagine it, you had all of these incredible jazz clubs and black musicians and singers who were just immensely talented. You had venues where black art was being viewed for the first time. So the artists were coming out, the visual artists. And then, of course, you had black publishers who, for the first time, were saying, hey, let's write what's real. Let's not just write to please white publishers or a white audience, but let's write what's really the truth about our experience, and let's publish it ourselves and see what happens. And so the whole thing just kind of exploded. And what happened is that a lot of whites would come into Harlem and go to the jazz clubs because they were hearing, the word was spreading, wow, you need to go to Harlem and listen to these incredible musicians and singers and see this art and read this literature. So they were coming in by the droves, and they were absolutely, many of them just transformed by the music and the art and the creativity. I often, think of my little church where I was raised, and most of the white churches that I have gone to. So, on Sunday morning, we stand up and sing like this, and everything is just so proper. And then if you go into a black church, and I happen to be privileged to live just across the street from a fantastic church where the congregation is primarily black, man, they are just singing from their souls. It is just so good. And you walk out of there and everybody is happy and everybody's excited, and we're coming out like, oh, Lord, we went to church again. Jeez, we'll have to come back next week. Oh, yeah, right? So it's a whole different feeling. And you'll read about that when we get to Zora Neale Hurston's wonderful autobiographical piece, How It Feels to Be Colored Me, when she talks about her real life experience of being in a jazz club, and she feels the music in the depths of her soul, but her white companion can't quite get it. The good news is, though, that a lot of white people did get it. And so this really transformed everything and set the stage for the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And it also set the stage for these incredible black artists like the Supremes and the Temptations, and for Motown and all of that a little later on. So the essence of the Harlem Renaissance was summed up by critic and teacher Alain Locke in 1926 when he declared that through art, Negro life is seizing its first chances for group expression and self-determination. So Harlem became the center of this spiritual coming of age in which Locke's new Negro, as he put it, transformed social disillusionment into racial pride. And for the first time, these amazingly creative people felt pride in what they did, and they realized the true value of their own talent. And so we had famous and incredibly gifted writers from this period like Zora Neale. Look at her picture in our textbook. Oh my gosh, you can see her with that little hat on. What a great lady. Langston Hughes, County Cullen, we're going to be reading all of those folks. Nella Larson, McKay, Thurman, Jean Toomer, to just name a few. So it's a wonderful period in American literature, one of my favorites. I have a concentration in Southern and in African American lit, and a minor in Africana Studies. And so this period really appeals to me so much, and I get excited about entering into it and doing the readings. So thank you for listening to me. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time around.